Hey, everybody. Welcome to Remixing Relationships, where we're promoting healthy relationships over here. Not perfect relationships, but healthy relationships and doing things differently. I'm excited about this episode today, and my guest definitely had to have my girl on. But welcome to Remixing Relationships, where we dive deep into the art of creating sustainable and healthy relationships, right? Again, I am Kendall Anisha, Fave Life Coach, the Remix Coach, and together we'll explore fresh perspectives and strategies to transform your relationship. Whether you're looking to strengthen, heal, or completely remix your love connections, you are in the right place. This is going to be a good one. This is episode 27. If you're looking, my background is different. I'll pick up next week with the background you're used to seeing, but the information is still the same. It's been a weird day for me, but it's been very reflective. And it is it's National Black Women Rest Day. And Black women carry so much, whether in relationships or otherwise. It's time for us to rest, not only rest our bodies, but rest our minds. And it was one of those days for me where I feel like I needed to rest my mind, rest myself, because, I want to just talk to some women out there before I pull out my guest. Pull up, pull up. But just to talk to some women out there, we all get discouraged sometimes, myself included. We all have days where our mind is just racing, the tears may fall, whatever the case may be. And sometimes it's just an indicator that you need to rest. Now, March 10th is National Rest Day for Black Women Rest Day, however you want to say it. But we have to implement more days like that just in general, because rest is well. We're going to get started with today's show. Hey everybody, I'm Kendall Anisha, Fave Life Coach, the Remix Coach. Life Coach Kendall Anisha. All right, y'all, we got another great episode coming up of Remixing Relationships. Tonight, we are diving into three powerful words that can make or break any relationships. Is vulnerability, value, and validation. Think about this. How many times have you struggled to open up because you were afraid of being judged? How often have you questioned your own worth in a relationship? And when was the last time you truly felt seen or heard? These three things, vulnerability, value, and validation, are foundational of deep, meaningful connections, right? But here's the twist. If they are not balanced, relationships can quickly turn into a space of confusion, insecurity, and frustration. So tonight we're remixing it all, breaking down what these words really mean, how they can show up in our relationships, and what we can do to make sure we're giving and receiving them in a healthy way. You don't want to miss this conversation. So right now I have author, business owner, publisher, Arilia Winn coming to Remixing Relationships to talk about this. Let's go.
Woo, let's go. Hey. Thank you so much for having me.
You are welcome. It is my pleasure. You know, my little sister. And I definitely want to talk about some of the things we talked about before we started, because this show is about singleness, right? Dating, engaged couples in relationships, couples in long-term marriages, short-term marriages, and it's for everybody, just learning to do things differently and promoting healthy relationships, not perfect relationships, but healthy relationships. So when I told you we were talking about vulnerability, value, and validation, what were your first thoughts about that?
Man, it's so funny. So when you first presented this to me, I thought, oh, I've already been working on all of this. Literally, just last night was journaling my thoughts just around relationships, really, because I'm a single mother. been single for a while, been kind of on this healing journey,
Mhm.
specifically more so emotional healing. And last night I really came to the conclusion that, some of these things are earned. You know,
Mhm.
before now, like recently, I was just giving anybody my emotional attachment just because
Mm.
they were vulnerable with me. I thought, oh, this is someone I should, think about all the time, reach out to. And I found myself overextending to these people. They didn't earn my trust. They didn't
Mhm.
earn my emotional attachment. They didn't earn anything. They weren't consistent with their presence. They weren't consistent with their effort. They weren't consistent with just their time with me. And so it became, like you said earlier, it became just not healthy. It became an unhealthy relationship because of the unbalanced dynamic that I would have with friends, with business partners, with potential um, guys that I could see myself in a relationship with, and it just ended as fast as it started. And so when
Right.
you were like, let's talk about value, vulnerability, and validation, I thought, ooh, this is gonna be good. I'm living through this right now. So I'm
Sure.
really excited to get into this conversation. Yeah.
I love it. So I just want to welcome the listeners, whether you're watching live or the playback, to Remixing Relationships. Thank you for continuously joining and coming back. Um, so, how vulnerability, value, and validation shape relationships? We're going to talk about that. And I just want to explain why these three elements are essential in love, even friendship, right? But any
Mhm.
type of relationship, I'm going to start there. But of course, we mix in relationships. We're talking about romantic relationships. So, what vulnerability really means, it's not a weakness. And oftentimes, people in relationships think it's a weakness. It's really courage to be vulnerable with your mate, whether it's your boyfriend, girlfriend, spouse, or dating. And it's interesting how they handle your vulnerability. That's the telltale sign. So, why people struggle with being vulnerable? Why do they? Fear of rejection, past hurt, trust issues, and how vulnerability builds deeper connections is it builds trust in relationships. So, we're going to talk about examples of healthy vulnerability and then just over sharing. All right. So, when you
Mhm.
vulnerability, let's start there. What do you think the strengths are about being vulnerable? Because it does create a space where, trust is involved, right? So when you think
Mhm.
about vulnerability, which is not easy for some people, what do you think?
I think vulnerability is just being your authentic self. It's being who you are. It's almost like what's coming to mind is like standing in front of somebody almost naked. It's a freedom. It's them seeing you for who you really are. And that's vulnerability. It's taking off that veil. It's peeling back layers of yourself, because we know that we're all complex people. And so being vulnerable is okay. Let's get deeper. Let me peel back this layer and show you this side of me. Okay, let me peel
Mhm.
back another layer and talk to you about some of the things I've been through, or peel back another layer, tell you, hey, this is what I'm used to in relationships. And
Mhm.
just peeling back those layers with that person, and then yeah, seeing how they handle that information, and making your move from there.
Yes. And a lot
Mhm.
of people are afraid to be vulnerable because people have violated their vulnerability. There's another V actually, but violated
Mhm.
their vulnerability. So when they get into another situation, they're afraid to be vulnerable because of the last person, unless the new person shows themselves not to be warranted of their or accepting of their vulnerability. I want to also go through them and then we're going to circle back. So let's talk
Mhm.
about value, knowing your worth, right? And
Yeah.
recognizing others' worth. Because if we're remixing relationships and doing things differently, it's not just about our value, it's about their value and how we can be of value to one another. So the difference between self worth and how others value is a conversation maybe that needs to be had or seen by the person being the person. So signs that someone values you in a relationship, their actions, their respect, and their consistency. Why knowing your own value presents settling for less. And that you talked a little bit about that. So we're going to get into that. But how do we communicate and reinforce value in relationships? So I'm going to ask you that. And then I want to talk about, because you mentioned earlier that you settled for less. Was it that you didn't know your value, or someone along the line told you didn't have value?
Yeah. What was the first question?
Just how do we communicate and reinforce value in relationships?
I think we do it with our presence, and with our words as well. I know, for example, for me, I don't want to put him out there, but we'll just say months ago, I was talking to a gentleman, and it came down to, hey, this is what I expect. This is what I'm used to. And being able to articulate that was very important. It was a very pivotal moment in our connection. And we disconnected because one, I'm not putting up with X, Y, and Z, and being able to articulate that and say that was key, but also to be able to set a boundary and say, hey, this is what I'm used to. This is what I expect. I understand you're your own person. You can do whatever you want. But if you do these things that I don't like, or if you are expecting me to be this way, this is what's going to happen. I'm not going to be around. I'm going to disconnect. You're not going to hear from me. I'm not going to be blowing up your phone like the girls that you're used to. I'm not going to be, we're not texting every day. You got to pick up a phone and holler at me, schedule a date, something, whatever. If you can't do that, I'm not going to be around. And it was just that because, some people might say, well, that's kind of harsh. That's kind of rigid. But like I said, I've been on the other side where these things were not in place, and it was not good for me. And so I know moving forward, I have to be able to have those words with someone. And that's being vulnerable. To me, that's being vulnerable and saying, hey, look, this is what I got going on. These are my standards. Can you meet them? If not, move around. Move around. Okay. And so that's just where I'm at.
No, but that's real. That's real. But that's really boundaries too, and setting your standards, because you do know you have values. And then some people, when they get into relationships, the other person becomes their value and they forget that they have value. I've seen that happen often. So to be able to hold on to your value and to really set those boundaries, you're showing yourself and the other person that you do have values. I want to talk about validation as our last V, and then we're going to go back. But so what validation looks like, right? In a healthy relationship, the difference between needing validation and seeking approval, right? How do we validate a relationship without losing yourself? Because so much validation, trying to get validation from the other person, or to feel loved, or going back to feel valued, people are seeking validation in another person. And it gets tricky when you get into a relationship or a marriage, because validation it can be healthy if it's both people lifting one another and validating, what they know about the person, or just needing to seek approval. What do you think the difference is when people are they have to seek approval, right? Or it's validated?
Yeah, when someone's just seeking approval, a lot of times there's nothing wrong with wanting to be recognized, but sometimes we can take it to the extreme. And I think that has to do with your self-worth. If you're not secure in who you are, you're going to be looking for validation everywhere. You're going to be looking for someone to recognize you or always affirm you. And like I said, it's an extreme. It's almost like an unhealthy amount. You're getting upset when someone is not saying, oh my God, you did a good job, or hey, just little things. I think that sometimes we do validate each other, but sometimes it's not always verbal. And I think that also like self-awareness and being aware of
Mhm.
our partner and being aware of our relationships and knowing how that person shows up for us and how they might validate us without words is very
Right.
important. And I think that
Well,
that
give
will
an example
also,
of that. I think that's important. Give an example of that where you can
what do you mean?
validate without words.
Without
Where
words?
you can validate without words. Yeah.
How to validate without words? Through actions. I can't think of a specific action. I'm trying to think of a time
Mhm.
where I was validated without words. It might be so in
Mhm.
business. I could give an example in
Mhm.
business. Referrals. That has
Mhm.
been my number one lead generator
Mhm.
is referrals, and that
Mhm.
validates me. That lets me know you're doing a good job. People that want to refer me, I'm like, oh yeah,
Mhm.
that lets me know I'm doing a good job. They don't have to tell me I'm doing a
You know,
good
I
job.
refer you.
I was getting ready to say, you validate me all the time just by, oh, I will get an email. Oh, Kendall sent me your, oh yeah. I'm like, okay, stuff like that. People might be talking about you behind your back, referring you. That's an
Mhm.
action. They might not say it to your face, but to me, that's a good example right there.
Yes, that is good because it's showing through the action. But then when
Mhm.
you want somebody or you need somebody to validate whatever it is, then that's not healthy if you need it to be done, right?
Mhm.
And without action and showing that. Um when validation is missing, how does that lead to distance and resentment? Because a lot of relationships, when they're looking for something and they're not getting it, it does turn to building distance in between, and it builds resentment. And that's something that is a poison in relationships, because if somebody is
Yeah.
not getting, because the validation can look like affirming too, affirming
Mhm.
somebody's feelings and emotions and thoughts and, actions, just affirming that they're on the right track or they're doing the right thing or you believe in them or you have faith in them, whatever that looks like. That it could be a healthy dose of that just by affirming. But if you
Mhm.
need it, like you can't process without it, then that's something that you have to dig deeper with. You agree with that?
I agree. Oh yeah, I 100% agree with that for sure. If it's something that you're longing for, you're clinging to this validation, then that's unhealthy. To me, that's low
Yes.
self-worth. That's someone who's unsure of themselves, maybe someone who might even be learning themselves.
Yes.
I said I've been there before, and so I get it. I give that person grace, but I think that
Mhm.
that's something for sure to work through.
Yes, because like with vulnerability, the connections, some of those can be surface level and then they can go deeper. And without understanding value or people settling or taking others for granted, that could be an issue in a relationship because you don't see the value or you're taking it for granted. Like the person is always going to be there. And without validation, I talked about feeling seen, and with love languages, like the 5 different love languages, I always say there's a
Mhm.
6th, and I heard someone else say this before too, because it's being seen, right? Being heard, being
Mhm.
understood. And that is a part of showing value. That is a part of vulnerability. So somebody can see the whole entire you. If you're now, you have to be mindful of who you show that to. Obviously, you can't just go
Mhm.
around just spilling, your whole self out to everybody, but it is a value, right? It is um a vulnerable side that everybody doesn't get to see. So I want to ask our viewers, whether you're watching live or the playback, which of these 3 do you struggle with the most? And I'm going to ask our guest Arilia Winn also,
Mm.
Miss Winn, which of the 3 do you struggle with most? Being vulnerable, knowing your value, or feeling like you need to be validated? I'll ask you guys whether you're watching live or the playback, and definitely put it in the chat. But I want to ask you, Aurelia, what do you struggle with the most, or what have you struggled with the most?
Yeah, I would say vulnerability. I'm still, I do in my mind because, like you said earlier, it's not perfect. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? And so I'm still figuring out and this is why I journal and I take notes, and
Mhm,
I try to keep a file, kind of like a mental file on
mhm,
people and how they show up for me. But vulnerability, I'm still figuring out who deserves my vulnerability, who
mhm,
has earned that. To me, I feel like it
mhm.
needs to be earned. Some people
Yeah,
say, no, that's just something you give. That's just you
yeah.
being your authentic self.
Mhm.
Uh, yes, and but not everybody deserves my whole truth. And so
Yes,
I'm
that's
still
it.
trying to figure that out. Like, who are the people in
That's
my
it.
life that deserve all of me? Who has shown me, who has proved to me that I can trust them with my whole self, with my just who I am. And who are the people that I might need to, they get certain pieces of me. Like, I'm still trying to figure out that vulnerability piece and who those people are that I can be, that I know that I'm safe with. And so
Mhm.
I'm working through that. And even being vulnerable with dating, I'm still trying to figure out how to navigate that as well. I'm just like, ooh, I don't know. It's a lot. It's a lot for
Yeah.
me. Yeah.
Yeah, but in order to have any type of relationship that's of value and to have that deeper connection, you have to be vulnerable. Like,
Yeah.
unfortunately, there's no way around it if you want a deep connection. If you want to swim
Mhm.
in the shallow pool, then you don't have to be vulnerable. You can just be surface level. But if you want to go to the next level and you want to have a deeper connection with somebody, you have to be able to be vulnerable. That's the only way that a relationship is going to go the distance. Now, if you're with somebody who doesn't appreciate your vulnerability or they're not willing to be vulnerable with you, then that's not going to work either. So even
Mhm.
when you are vulnerable or you decide to give that, it's not always the case that somebody else will. So that's why it's important to have that communication and to really, vet people, because like you
Mhm.
said, you have been in situations, and so many of us have been in situations like that, where we're not vetting the people properly, or we're bypassing some of the signs. But that's not how
Mhm.
we're going to have healthy relationships. So we're all fallible people, right? All, make mistakes, and but hopefully learn through the mistakes and through the past relationships, so you can have a healthy relationship. And that's what the goal of this podcast is to have conversations and to talk about these things, because these are real issues. Have you ever struggled with knowing your value?
Yes. Oh my goodness. Yes. I was actually having this conversation with my dad a couple weeks ago about self-worth. I said, nobody told me. We never had a discussion about self-worth. I said, now I'm a mother to a daughter, and I'm always telling her, know your self-worth, know your worth. Don't put up with certain things. You put yourself first. I said, for me, I was taught that you put others first, just
Mhm,
because that was kind of the Christian thing to do, put others first. But I wasn't taught about my worth. And so it was almost like it just bypassed myself. And so coming and healing, going to therapy and just learning about different things, learning about self-worth, I thought, oh my God, this was like a missing piece that
mhm.
we never talked about this in my family. We never talked about, sure, we had family members say, oh, you're beautiful, you're talented, da 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 da. I didn't equal that to I'm worth something. I didn't know that I was worth different, I didn't know that I was worth good things. I didn't know that I was worth great treatment. I didn't know,
Mhm.
and go and having that in business, it was like, man, it messes up so much.
Yes,
So many areas when you don't know your worth. You
yes,
undercharge, you
yep,
overperform, you put up
yep,
with anything until you really get
yep,
tired and you come to almost like a crossroad and you say, I'm worth more than this. I know
yes,
that. And it was
yes.
like at that moment, okay, that's when I started learning about self-worth and increasing my own worth and saying, you know what, I don't like X, Y, and Z. Let me write this down and let me be able
Mhm,
to articulate that to
mhm.
people. Hey, I don't like this and that because I'm worth more. I'm worth
Yes,
better treatment than that. And being okay with them not agreeing or with them moving differently after I make that known that, hey, I'm worth more. Like, we gotta do something else, that kind of thing. And so, yeah, it's woo, I can't even tell you. I
yeah,
can't
it's
even
not.
tell you the things I put
Yeah,
up with. Yeah, for not knowing my self-worth. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's so powerful. And you're speaking to somebody out there because it is all, a lot of us accept under our self-worth, right? And
Mhm.
it's important to really just know the worth and the value that you have, right? And not put
Yeah.
all the value in someone else, because you both can be valuable together.
Mhm.
And that's what strengthens a relationship. And again, when we talk about vulnerability, fear of rejection and judgment. Nobody wants to turn their heart inside out, because it's like, okay, well,
Yeah.
what would they say, or what will they say when they find out that I'm not perfect, and what do we do?
Mhm.
And it's crazy, because those are the things we say. But if somebody can't handle our vulnerability as men and women, then that has to be questioned, whether that is the person or not, because no one should throw anybody's vulnerability up in their face, right? And that's the thing.
Mhm.
Let's see. We need to save our worth like we save our money. Yes, and I think that's so
Yeah.
important. That's a powerful statement, Vanique. Absolutely. And when we
Mhm.
think about vulnerability, right, a belief is showing emotions are weak. They're not. But
Mhm.
because somebody can handle your emotions, then may me be the weak one. The person that's showing their emotions, it's not weak to be able to be vulnerable. It does not mean that you're strong when you're vulnerable, but that's what some people think. And because someone else may have in the past ridiculed your vulnerability or your emotions, or
Mhm.
called you a crybaby, or why are you emotional, all of those things, that makes people hard. So when they get
Yeah.
into the next relationship, then they're not sharing or showing anything. And then that is unhealthy as well, because that relationship, you're just going to continue to play in the shallow waters, and it's just going to start all over again. Will you agree?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I've had relationships like that with women, friendships where it's very shallow, to the crying situation. I will cry when I'm in, if
Me
something's
too.
happening. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cry.
Me too.
Okay. If you
Me
can't
too.
handle my tears, if you
Me
can't just, sometimes I have to tell those that I'm close with, they know, look, just let her, just let me cry. Let me get through it, and then
Mhm.
speak to me, uplift me then. But don't try to stop my tears. I will tell a friend,
Yes.
hold up,
Don't try to stop my
hold up with
tears.
the hold up with the encouragement. I need to get this out. Um and it can become an educational thing, and it can
Yeah.
become something that brings us closer, because my
Yeah.
friends now understand, hey, my tears does not mean that I'm weak. It's a
That's right.
release. It's something I have to do. I have to let this out, because if I don't let this out, how about stress is a silent killer? Like, I
Yeah.
know that might be kind of extreme, but if you're
It's
not
true.
expressing your emotions, you can be hurting yourself.
Mhm.
And I'm just like, I don't have time for that. I'm a single mother. I'm my child's only parent. I don't got time to be sick. I need to cry. Like, we don't have no time to play with health. We don't have time for that over here.
Mhm.
So it's like, no, let me cry. And then I might be ready to hear your words of encouragement. I might be ready
Yes.
for you to help me change my focus, shift my emotions elsewhere. But in that time, let me cry, let me be vulnerable with you. And if you just can't, okay, I know how to move around you. And it does create distance. It does.
Yep, it sure does. And it's trust me, it does. I know that personally. It will create distance. If you feel like you can't be vulnerable, it's going to create edge in the relationship. And
Mhm.
everybody should be able to let their hair down in their relationship. If they can't, it is a problem for sure. So I agree with you. Um, but it builds trust and
Yeah.
emotional intimacy, and encourages deeper, and that's what you want. So a relationship where one
Mhm.
person always holds back their true feelings out of fear, that can impact whether you trust in that relationship moving forward. So ask yourself this, guys: when was the last time you were truly vulnerable with somebody, and then what happened, and would you be vulnerable again? So I want you guys to listen to that. All right, so when you're lacking value, you're staying in one-sided relationships where the other person seems valuable and you seem not, feeling unappreciated or taken for granted. So someone can constantly be doing all the emotional labor in the relationship without reciprocation. And then how can that affect your self-worth? So think about that. And I want to ask you, really, so if you're the one just having all the emotional labor in the relationship without any reciprocity, without any it's circling back to you, how can that affect your self-worth when you're giving, and the person is taking?
Yeah, it makes you feel like
Because it has
you're
to be
nothing.
reciprocated.
Yeah, it makes you feel like you're nothing, because why aren't they also considering you? Like that then becomes a question, like, am I not worthy to be considered to this person? I'm always considering them. And I used to think like, oh, maybe we're just in this season where this person needs to be cared for more than me. But no, no. I mean, it depends. Even if, for example, in a caregiving relationship where someone is taking care of somebody else who can't take care of themselves, there's still ways for the sick person to show care to the other person. It might not be, the same as like physical care, but there's still verbal care. There's still ways that someone can show up for the other person. And so it's like, if I'm always giving, overextending myself for someone, yeah, that starts to wear away at my self-worth. That starts to wear away at my energy. I'm tired because I'm carrying all the weight of this relationship. It makes you want to escape it. It makes you not want to be in that space anymore. And oftentimes it can lead to breakup or ending of friendships if one person is always constantly showing up for the other person.
Right.
Yeah.
I totally agree, because it has to be, not that a relationship is going to be 50-50, but both people have to be seen in the relationship. One person just can't be that for the other person. It has to be both people. Both people have to be willing to have a conversation, communicate, talk, and figure it out, because it can't be the one person always. It can't be the one person emotionally holding up the relationship, especially if you want an intimate connection that's going to last the test of time. You have to be able to communicate, and you have to be able to make sure the other person is seen and you're seen as well. That's healthy. If one person's needs matter the most, one person dictates how the relationship's going to go, who's going to be vulnerable, who's going to have value, who's going to validate, then that's an unbalanced, unhealthy relationship, because both people have to be heard, have to be seen, and have to be valued. I'm going to give an example of the difference between validation and seeking an approval in relationship. So validation, I see you, I hear you, and your feelings matter. That's healthy. That's healthy. Validation, I see you, I hear you, and your feelings matter. Seeking approval is, I need your validation to feel worthy. That is the difference. I need your validation to feel worthy, because if you don't validate me and you don't put a stamp on me, then I feel less than. But validation is, I see you, I hear you, and your feelings matter. Sometimes that's all you need to hear from your mate. Is I hear you and I see you, because so many people aren't seen or heard. Let's see. I heard someone say a relationship is not 50-50. It's not. It should be whatever you don't have, the other should pick it up 100%. That's why it can be 20-80. It could be 40-60, whatever it is, because everybody is not going to have 100% to give another person. So I want to talk about when validation is missing in a relationship. People shut down emotionally. They start to validate in unhealthy ways, and distance and resentment build. So it's important to have a healthy relationship, and validation is a healthy part of a relationship. Let me give you an example. A person opening up about a tough day, for instance, but their partner brushes it off, and how does that impact their connection? So if you're having a not so good day and your partner brushes off your feelings, like what does that say to you, Aurelia?
Yeah, that says that they don't care. They're selfish. I actually had a friend mention something similar to me the other day about she was having a rough day. She got home. A guy she's dating was like, "Hey, where's dinner?" kind of thing. She's known him for a while, so that's just their dynamic. And she said, "Hey, I'm not having a good day. The last thing I want to do is cook dinner." Totally dismissed what she had said and was like, "Okay, I'm coming over. When will dinner be ready?" And I'm like, "Girl, what you gonna do?" She's like, "That's crazy." I'm like, "That's crazy, man. Like, what? You're telling this person you're not having a good day. You're tired. They woke you up out of your sleep asking you to still make dinner because that's what you do." I said, to me, there's a song by Sierra called "If I Was a Boy,"
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
it just says, validate somebody. In that instance, a better action would have been to, okay, I hear you. I hear that you're tired. Hey, let's do something else. You're always cooking. Let's try something else because I know that you like to cook, but today hasn't been a good day. So let's
Mm-hmm.
do something else. Right then and there, to me, that's validation. That's
Yes, it
validating
is.
that
Yes.
person's emotion. That's validating their experience and
Yep.
offering a different solution. That would have been the way to handle it. That would have been the way
Yes.
to handle it, and how to move and operate that. But yeah, when they don't see you, when they don't validate you, when they are just not aware of your needs like that,
Mm-hmm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
disappointing. It's really disappointing, and it really makes it hard to continue to grow with that person.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Exactly. You hit it right on the head. Um, so vulnerability allows you to be seen. Knowing your value ensures you don't settle, and validation makes relationships emotionally fulfilling, right? So common
Mhm.
mistakes some people make: being vulnerable with someone who doesn't value them, like we talked about, seeking
Mhm.
validation instead of knowing your own worth, and valuing someone who doesn't reciprocate. Those are three common mistakes that people make with those three V's: being vulnerable with someone who doesn't value them, validation instead of knowing their own worth, and valuing someone who doesn't reciprocate. So let's talk about how we can remix this. So practical ways we can start remixing the relationship today. So practice small acts of vulnerability. So if you're dating, go out on. I was watching the Netflix show, The Later Daters, and it was older
Mm.
people finding love and they were dating. And I remember the relationship coach said it, and I totally agreed with her. And I'm going to talk about that now. She was like, when you go out on the dates, even if it's not a relationship, share something that's vulnerable about yourself just to see if you could
Mm.
do it. Just share something small. So that's practicing acts of vulnerability. So you don't have to tell your whole life story. It could be something that's small but very vulnerable to you. Practice doing that, because that's how you're going to connect with anybody when you're dating. So I'm gonna tell you that, really. I know you want
Yeah.
love in your life and you're ready for somebody's son.
Nobody's listening.
So right, somebody's son. So you're going to practice some type of vulnerability. There's something
Mhm.
that's going to be vulnerable that um you're going to want to say. What is one thing you think, and you don't have to say it here, but something in one area? What is something that you're willing to share in the dating process that may be
Mm.
a little vulnerable?
Mhm.
You don't have
Yeah,
to
no.
say it here, but just about that. And you can if you want, but
Yeah, no, when you were talking about that, I was thinking, well, what would be my one little thing that I would share? I don't know off the top of my head. That's definitely my journaling prompt for tonight. What is one small thing that I can share um, that isn't my whole life story?
I
What
think you
what
can
would that
share
be?
the
I don't know.
vulnerability. I think you can share that you're a single mom. That's a
Okay.
vulnerable space. It's not always
Really?
easy.
So
That's vulnerable.
Otherwise, I've heard people say, don't mention you're a single mom. Don't bring up your kids when
Why
dating.
not?
I would love to
No,
hear your perspective.
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely, because you want to know how somebody is off the top. Because
Yeah.
why date somebody 6 months, then you tell them you have a child and they be like, I don't like kids. Oh, I don't see my own kids.
Yeah.
Or I
Yeah.
don't know, right off the top, because that's the
Mhm.
most significant, important part in your life. So you
Right.
share them at the top. It's no time to waste time. And then you're dating somebody 3 weeks. Oh, I got something to tell you. I'm a single mom. I have a child. Oh, and it could
Mhm.
be going somewhere. Yeah, say it right off the top.
Yeah.
Right off the top. Even when you're having a conversation on the phone with somebody, if you're dating, share that.
Mhm.
I'm a single mom, it's so worth it, but sometimes it's not easy. That's vulnerable. Share that right off the top. And then
Yeah.
share, I'm not looking for a daddy for her. Let's be clear. I'm just
Right.
sharing this with you because this is a big part of who I am and my why. I think it's very
Mhm.
important to share that right off the top. 100%.
Yeah. Okay.
Because
I will take that advice. Go ahead.
yes, because you're not having feelings with somebody you don't know them.
Right.
So whether you walk out the door, you're not invested with nothing.
Mhm.
If they walk out the door, let them walk.
Okay.
But
Period.
when your feelings start being wrapped up, and then that's when you're like, ooh, the longer you wait, the harder it is going to be to have real, honest conversations in that little dating phase.
Mhm.
It's going to be in the back of your mind. Oh, I didn't tell him this, or I didn't tell him that. Let me get this out. And it's going to be, like this. So you got to be able to do that.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah, it's important to do that for sure. But when you think about, I want to talk about the fear of judgment. Why do you think people are fearful of being judged?
Um, I think we don't want to be seen as bad.
Mhm.
I think we don't want to be seen as wrong. And so
Mhm.
sometimes when someone is judging us, that can come
Mhm.
off as, oh, they think I'm bad or they think something is wrong with me. And we don't want to feel that way because that's kind of uncomfortable or
Mhm.
it goes against what we believe about ourselves
Mhm.
or being judged where we could be afraid that actually they are right. Actually, they're saying something that is true that we agree with, but it might not necessarily be positive. I think sometimes we all think
Mhm.
that I'm just this good, great person, and that might not be the
Mhm.
case. Not everybody likes you, not everybody likes me. And we think, if I'm being myself, this person's gonna say they don't like me. And okay, like that doesn't mean that there's something wrong with me, but I think that a lot of us are afraid of being judged because then we have to agree that, okay, to this person, they think that there's something wrong with me. To me, I love that flaw. To me, I love what they're saying that they don't like. And we
Mhm.
like it takes time to get there. I think for a long time, like I just wanted to please people. And so when you're
Mhm.
focused on pleasing people and making everybody happy around you, you don't want to be judged. You don't want to hear where you're wrong or you don't want to hear maybe negative things about you or even you just don't want to hear that. And so it's like when you get to a place of just being secure in who yourself, flaws and all, flaws that other people might have that you might enjoy, you can let go of that fear of being judged and you can say, you know what, this is who I am. And I love it. I love all of me. But yeah, just not wanting to be wrong um creates that fear of judgment. We want to be
Yeah.
right. Always want to be right. Yeah.
Yes. And what advice would you give somebody that, because you said working on your value and your self-worth and having to do that, what advice would you give a woman of any age or a man of any age for that matter,
Mhm.
um, that needs to know their value? And I know you struggle with that. What advice would you tell them about their self-worth and their value and how important it is?
Yeah, I would say your self-worth and your value is for you. What do you think about you? What's the story that you say about yourself? And really sit with that. If you don't like you, well then start there. Like, you really have to have self-compassion for yourself. Work on that. Figure out what parts of you do you love. Do you love your bald head? Do you love your smile? Do you love, like, what do you love? And maybe you might have to seek a little bit of validation from those who love you and who don't mind. Say, hey, what is it that you like about me? And really consider their advice. They might say, oh, I love that you're so funny. I love that you're kind. And take that and really consider it and say, oh, do I love that about myself too? And start working on that and hold on to those truths and let them cancel out anything else that comes in. Let them cancel out those flaws. I think it's also important to know our weaknesses, because that was something for me, like, what are my weaknesses? And I can say, okay, nobody can tell me about my weaknesses because I already know it. And sometimes when we're a people pleaser or we're working on our worth, we can have a skewed perspective of ourselves. We can think, oh, I'd never do anything wrong. Or we might be aware that we do things wrong, but we don't really know. So it's just really taking time to learn who you are. I think when you come to know who you are, you can say, you know what? I don't do everything right. Not everybody likes me. I don't even like everybody. Right. That's okay. I'm still worth good treatment. I'm still worth nice things. Even if I am this way or that way, there's still good qualities that I have about myself. I'm not totally horrible. I'm not that. And so it's just, having that time with ourselves to say, to define it, even journaling it down, writing it down. I actually have a journal. It's called Why I'm Good and Poppin'.
Oh, no, that's right. I need that.
This is why I'm good and popping, and I write in it, girl, this is why you're good and popping today. This is what you did today. Like, and remind yourself, because
I love
self-worth, you're not always gonna have high self-worth. There can be times in your life where you might feeling down in the dumps about yourself. Well, if you have a journal where you're keeping up why you're good and popping, boom, crack that open on that day where you're not feeling like you're good and popping, and remind yourself of that. And this is just a practical tip that you can have, and nobody has to know. Like, I just told you that, but like, nobody has to know that you have that going on. It's just for yourself, and that's how you increase your self-worth. Think of things that you can do to pop out and show them. Like, can pop out and show. Pop out and show them.
That's my birthday twin. Sometimes you got to pop out and show them. You do. Sometimes if people don't really understand your value and know your value because you have given them your value, and then when you really are who you are, they're not going to be able to handle it. They're not going to be able to handle your shine for real. They're not going to be able to handle it, because if they're used to you playing the back, right, and catering to them and making them feel valued, and because you don't understand yours, or validating them all the time, then if they're not going to be able to handle it if they don't get that. And you're taking that moment for yourself, and that becomes unhealthy. That's why it's so important to really practice this, both men and women, so you can enter a relationship that is healthy. You said the book of self-worth is called Learn Your Worth, Own It, and Celebrate Your Worth. Who is that by? Definitely. And that's, it's important to be able to do that. We're talking about vulnerability, value, and validation. And when some people think of validation, why do you think some people think validation? You shouldn't have validate you. But I just talked about is feeling seen, feeling heard, and feeling understood. Why do you think that people think somebody to validate you? Why do you think that gets a bad rap?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I know I've had someone tell me that before, like, oh, you don't have to, like, nobody needs to validate you. And I'm like, well, sometimes I need to be validated. I need to know that, like I said, that they see me and they hear me. And sometimes I just need to hear it, It's like, so I don't know. I don't know why people feel that way. Maybe it's just because of their own experiences. It could be a fear of relying on others, right?
Yeah.
You can't be so independent in a relationship, because then what do you need that other person for? I
Yeah.
think it's about interdependency. How can we lean on one another? How can we put our backs together and we can lean on each other, and we're both secure, and we can stand and hold each other up. I think that
That's it.
that's interdependence. But when we're so independent, oh, I don't need you to validate me.
That's it.
Okay, well, what am I like? What am I here for?
That's
Am I
it.
just here
Yeah.
to meet your physical fleshly needs? Miss me with
That's
that.
it.
I need
Right.
something deeper. I
Exactly.
need something deeper. So it's like,
Yeah.
no, validate me. Tell me you value me. Tell me, whatever it is, and tell me it's okay. I can be vulnerable with you. Show me
Yes.
that. Show me these things as well.
Yes.
And like we've been saying, that's how you have a deeper connection. But I think
Yes.
some people are afraid. I think it could be fear talking and thinking that, oh, if I'm reliant or if I'm asking someone to validate me, and there's a balance. We've already established that there's a balance of that. It's not you clinging on to somebody and begging them for validation. No,
Exactly.
there's a healthy amount,
Healthy.
of validation that can be and should be had in relationships.
Yes, I agree, because other people, if you affirming someone and someone's love language is affirmation, that's the
Mhm.
same as validating. I see you, I hear you, I understand you, and giving,
Mhm.
words that have power, still being honest and true, but still validating and not tearing somebody down, right? So that's really it, because there's so many unhealthy relationships. And that's why I wanted to talk about these three things, because people like vulnerability is weak, value, I know my value, or I
Yeah.
don't have value, or validation, like I'm good on my own, I don't need nobody you really do. People
Yeah.
don't understand what that is. It's almost saying I need it. But in a relationship, both people should have it. Both people should be seen,
Mhm.
heard, valued, understood. And you should be able to be vulnerable with your partner. If you can't be vulnerable with your partner, then who can you be vulnerable with?
Yeah.
How can you have a deep, meaningful relationship if you don't feel valued, if you don't have vulnerability, and there's no validation anywhere in the relationship? So some people, the past traumas or being hurt before
Mhm.
stops them from even knowing their value, knowing that they need validation, or able to be vulnerable. And I just want to debunk the myth that vulnerability and showing emotion is weak. We have to change the narrative with that, because so many people are walking around here about to explode. And that's why a lot of people are exploding, because they feel like they cannot be vulnerable. They have to wear a shield. And even as a life coach, I want people to know my life, just because I'm a life coach, don't mean my life is perfect. I don't want to be a perfect person. I'm a flawed person. And I will say that all the time. Who wants the pressure of being perfect?
Yeah.
Because one day a perfect person is going to pop. And whoever's in the way, it's going to be like if you shake up a soda can, and then you shake
Mhm.
up a soda bottle, and then you take the top off. It's going to explode. So you have to be able to have a safe place to land. And hopefully your relationship can be that, or your pending relationship can be that, your marriage can be that, whatever it is. But both parties have to do it, because no one is going to be vulnerable and the other person is not. Nobody is going to validate when the other person is being torn down. And nobody is going to be able to really stand in their value if somebody is not seeing it that you're with, especially if you're intimate. So out of all three of the things, we're going to wrap up. So what do you have to say about all three when you think about those things working together? What type of relationship do you see yourself in when you think about those three things?
When I think about these three things, I would say a loving and caring relationship. If these three things are present, that's a loving and caring relationship. But that also, to me, in my personal situation, that shows a lot of growth. Because I wanted to say this as well about the vulnerability piece. I think that there's a lot of strong people out there. I know some of us, we have strong friends, some of us, we are that strong friend, and I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of that
Mm-hmm.
is because we're not vulnerable, because we don't
Mm-hmm.
tell people, hey, actually, I'm hurting. Actually, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not good. Actually, I need
Mm-hmm.
someone that I can lean on, someone that I can go to for encouragement. When you're
Mm-hmm.
always that person for someone else, it's hard. It's hard to be
Mm-hmm.
vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I was having a conversation with my father about this, and he said, he calls me Ree. He said, Ree, like I was on the edge of like getting out of here because everybody thought I was perfect. And I actually was not doing good, but I didn't know who to tell. So he was like, I
Yeah.
had to call my mom and my sister and let them know I'm not okay. I actually need help. And I said, well,
Mm-hmm.
Dad, how come you didn't share that with nobody? Like, what did you think? You didn't think that you were worth
Mm-hmm.
sharing? He's like, no, people were so shocked that I was not okay. And I'm like, well, you're human. I was like, skip them. People, like, you got to be able to, and of course, nobody had told him
Yeah.
he was worth that. And I said, Black men, you are worth sharing your
Yes.
feelings. You are worth being human as well. Some things, yes, are trauma based, but some things are just
Yeah.
human. Some things are just human, and being vulnerable and being able to share that with somebody, at least one person. I said, I know I got at least one person I can be vulnerable with, and I have a good connection and relationship with them. And so I'm like, at least find you one person. I'm talking to the strong
That's
person,
right.
person who always has it together in public. If you always have it together, at least make sure you have one person in private that you can go to and be vulnerable with, because not being vulnerable is hurting you mentally, spiritually, and it's probably hurting you physically as well. And you just don't see it. And so I want to definitely say that it's a strength to be vulnerable. It's not weak, and knowing your value and asking for validation, all of that stuff is not connected to, it's not connected to trauma. Don't let these people out here tell you, oh, because your abandonment wounds, you want people to value you. It's not always that. It can also be just a human experience that you desire to have those things. And so just, you have permission to ask for those things in relationship. And as I'm saying that out loud, I'm saying that to myself as well. And
Yes.
it's okay. If they can't do it, they can do it. On to the next one.
Yes, it's okay if they can't do it, on to the next one. Because when you think that that's the only show in town, then you're going to accept anything. You're going to accept being devalued. You're going to accept not being able to be vulnerable. You're going to accept not hearing validation, right? So,
Mhm.
and you're going to think that's the only show pony in town, and it's not. I don't want anybody to think that they have to continue in a unhealthy relationship, because everybody deserves a healthy relationship. And the
Yeah.
healthiness starts with you. It don't start with the other person. Everybody want to point to the other person. That person ain't
Mhm.
healthy. Needs to do this, but it all starts with you. It starts with you. And then, because
Mhm.
you can't tell somebody to be vulnerable and you ain't vulnerable, you can't tell somebody to value themselves and you don't value yourself. You ain't validating yourself or somebody else. So you can't say nothing. All you can
Yeah.
do is just look and be like, But I pray that
Mhm.
everybody, has a healthy love, because I see, especially in the Black community, I see so many unhealthy relationships. I've been in them, and you don't even
Mhm.
realize that they're unhealthy until you come out of them, or till you do your self work, and then you realize, oh snap, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that's what it's about. My book I published with excuse me, Unhealed is showing.
Yes.
Unhealed
Woo.
is showing, okay? And sometimes you
Amazing.
need to check
Yeah.
it and begin healing. All right, before I close out, tell the people you were amazing. Let me just say this. This was a great conversation. If there's one takeaway from this conversation, it's vulnerability is not weakness. Value
Mhm.
starts with you, and validation is being seen, not seeking approval. When we remix these things, these three things, we build stronger and healthy relationships, y'all, whether that's within ourselves or in our partner. So the challenge, y'all, this week, and I really always talk off, she already talked about putting it in her journal. Take a moment to reflect. Are you allowing yourself
Mhm.
to be vulnerable with the right person? Or people, for that matter? Are you recognizing your own value instead of waiting for someone else to give you value, and are you offering validation to the person that you want validation from? That's the thing, because people say they want something, but they're not doing it. So I want you to think about that, and I'm going to let Arilia take us out, but don't forget to subscribe to this channel. If you want to donate, love donations, you can hit I always get it mixed up, the star on Facebook, shooting star, and you can hit the heart on YouTube, and you give 99 cents or whatever you want to give to the show if you feel compelled. But Remixing Relationships, once again, is about promoting healthy relationships. Aurelia, how can people get in touch with you? So good. How can they get in touch with you? Tell people what to do, your website, your social media handles, all of that.
All of that. So, of course, if you've been following Kendall and I for a while, you've seen my face probably, but if not, if you're first time here, my name is Arilia Winn. I do go by Miss Winn. I'm an author publisher. I am the CEO of Winn Publications. I publish books with authors, whether it be self-publishing or hybrid publishing. That's what I do. We actually have a book coming out in a couple of days. Special. We're working on that. That'll be out pretty soon. But I'm also an author, so I have a book coming out around something similar. It's called "Shut Up and Let Me Cry," and it's really just about addressing cliches that people will give instead of letting people share their emotions. And it does come from a very personal space, and I'm very vulnerable in the book, and so that'll be out pretty soon. I'm finishing up the cover and one more round of editing, so I think that will be out come April. So I'm really looking forward to that. Again, it's called Shut Up and Let Me Cry. You can get that.
I love that title.
Thank you. Yeah, winnpublications.com. That's WINN publications with an S. That'll be up there pretty soon. But yeah, this is what I love doing. Outside of publishing, I am someone who loves talking about healthy relationships, healthy mind, body, spirit, all of those things. All of those things impact how we show up in the world and how we impact and influence each other. The work that you do on yourself is so important, not just for you, but it also blesses those around you. And I've seen that firsthand. I've seen what it's like, and I've experienced what it's like to be around unhealthy or healing folks. And so I vowed to not be that. I vowed to work on my healing and work on my health, so that way I can show up for my child in a healthy way, and just for my family as well in a healthy way. And so I'm so grateful. Yeah.
I love that title. I'm definitely getting that. Shut up and let me cry. Stop telling people to stop crying, y'all. You're doing them a disservice. If they need to cry, allow them to shed those tears and get it out. This was great, y'all. This was so great. I'm continue to be referring people to you. I already told you. You already know what it is, and not just because I love you, is because you do amazing work, and you're passionate about what you do. And come on now. And she told you she's a single mom doing her thing. She started her business in her early 30s. So who doesn't want to support that? And it's not just supporting somebody that I like. She does good work. She's intentional about her work. She's meticulous. She doesn't play around. She's on time. If she says she's going to do it, she's going to do it. So I'm going to continue to send people your way. Duh.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So thank you, everybody, for joining me today as we explored new ways to remix and strengthen our life. We talked about vulnerability, value, and validation. We need all three. That is the takeaway for today. It's not being weak. It's not self-seeking because you need it. It's because that's part of a healthy relationship. So it's a reminder that healthy connections are in your reach, and together we can create the love and life you deserve. It's never too late to remix your life or love at any stage, age, or phase. Let's do things differently, y'all. It's about promoting healthy relationships and connections, whether you're single, dating, engaged, or marry. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching this episode of Remixing Relationships. Make sure you share this out. Make sure you share it on your social media platforms. Text it out, because these are the kind of conversations that need to be had. There's so much foolishness and nonsense out there when it comes to relationships, talking about high value man, high value women, and different things like that. It all starts with you. It's time to heal ourselves so we can have healthy relationships. Until next time, remember, you are somebody, because God don't make no junk, y'all. I had to say that for Arilia. She knows why I said that, but it's never too late to remix your love. God bless y'all. Peace.
Bye.
Thanks for watching.